Yeah, we're live. I am a little bit late. Got stuff we had to do tonight, but I'm here. And tonight I want to talk about headers, mostly because, and we're going to talk about headers run on a modular Ford, but this came from a question that came up actually about big block Chevys and on a supercharged combination. And so they were asking me, hey, what size header should we use on something that's making a lot of power? And I'm like, well, is this a turbo deal? Is this an NA deal? Is this what kind of things going on? No, it's a big, in this case, big positive displacement blower. And so the question is, should I run big headers? And this is an interesting thing, mostly because I've done lots of testing on this, and what it's brought about are more questions than answers. Because you would think, for instance, when we run if we were to run a big block Chevy, we run our big block Chevy, run a naturally aspirated big block Chevy, and we run one that's making a lot of horsepower, making something that's making like 1,000+ horsepower, let's say, on a big block Chevy or a big block Ford, whatever. When we run headers on it, we obviously don't run 1.75" or 1.7/8" or even 2-inch headers on a big block Chevy that's making that much power. We run big headers on them. We'll run 2 1/8, 2 1/4 even. A lot of times it's more a function when we're running stuff at Westech of what we have there for the dyno, but we'll put those size headers on it. And those size headers don't match the port, like they're not port matched to the header. Normally, like if it's a 2 1/4 header, that's bigger than the opening of the head port is. But those are the ones that we run. We run those. And then the thinking is that, okay, well, at least the general thinking for something like that is we're making a lot of power. We have a lot of exhaust flow. And so we need a big header. The big header and the exhaust flow thing go together, right? That's the way that it works. We got lots of flow. We got to get all that exhaust out. We got the blower pumping all the airflow in. So we got to be able to get it out. If it's a naturally aspirated well, same thing. We got a lot of exhaust flow. We got to get it all out. So on the blower thing, it's even more amplified, at least in most people's minds, that you have something forcing the air in. Now we got to get all that exhaust out. So we need something to help get all that exhaust out. So we're running a supercharged combination on the photo that you see there. That's a 5.4 liter, like a GT500 motor that has a Kenny Bell on it. And it made a lot of power. I think we went from like 600 horsepower all the way up near 1,000 horsepower. We might have even gone over that on some of the testing. But when we're making that much power on a supercharged combination, do we need, really big headers to help get all this power out? And then the question becomes, the reason that I bring up the big block Chevy is, like, if we have a supercharged big block Chevy making 1,000 horsepower, 1,100 horsepower, and it's like, let's say we did it to a 496 or even a 540. Let's say that we were doing it to a 540. And then we ran a 5.4 motor with like a modular Ford deal, 4 valve heads, a Kenny Bell blower, making more boost, but making the same power. Do those two things need the same header size? And this is where I don't know, because I don't know the reality of that. I don't know if a header size is, or at least I have my opinion about that. And I can go by lots of data that I have generated over all this testing that I've done. But it seems to indicate that that's not the case. For one, obviously, the port size of the modular Ford head is nowhere near what it is. The opening, let's say, is nowhere near as much as it is. We don't have nearly as big a cam. We don't have as much opening. The valve size is all quite a bit different. The RPM where they make it at, the pressure going into the motor is all different. And then the other thing to think about is, if this was, and this is a conversation I've had many times with people about headers, about any application. We're talking about putting stock exhaust manifolds or shorty headers or long tubes like on an LS, or testing it or whatever. And then we're going to get into a short discussion on turbo stuff too, because this comes into play here. And this is the other reason that I don't think I understand this the way that I would like to. So we have the motor making this much power, and we have different probably header needs for these two applications, different flow rates. And if we were only going by flow rate, if this was only a flow rate thing, we would just get rid of the header. I mean, we would just put zoomies on it And would it make more power with the zoomies because we have a blower forcing all the air in, and we're just trying to get all that exhaust out. But running zoomies on a motor like that doesn't make as much power as headers do. And so we there's more going on. There's obviously some scavenging going on, and then to make the headers more effective. And then this is why when we test these things, why we were running, like on this modular Ford, we ran 1 3/4 inch, 1 7/8, and I think 2-inch headers. And the 2-inch headers did end up making the most peak power, but there were trades elsewhere. And the other thing is that they, even at this elevated power level that we tested it at, the change in power between the headers was not substantial. I mean, it was, if I remember right, it was less than 20 horsepower, and it might have been more like 15, which is not, and that was only one spot on the peak. And that's not what people would expect. I mean, I've had people tell me, oh yeah, you go from even like on an LS or whatever, you go from, 1 3/4 to 1 7/8 or to an 1 7/8 to a 2-inch step header, you pick up 20 horsepower. I'm here to tell you that I have never seen that on an NA motor. And I know guys have run stuff and shown, I guess, where that happens, but we on a lots and lots of tests I've run on these kind of combinations, and we've swapped these headers mostly because that's a really easy swap. We don't have to go into the motor. I don't, like, if I have an LS motor on the dyno and I run a couple of sets of headers with it, it's just, it takes more time just to let it cool, to let the headers cool off so you can touch them, so you can swap the header. Like getting the hot one off, get the hot one off, and you have gloves on or whatever, you throw it down, you can put the cold one on, it works good. And then you get the motor warm back up and you make some runs. Header tests are really easy. They're fast and convenient. That's why we've done a lot of them. And since we have a bunch of them there, we had, when I was doing testing there, we had a bunch of headers there. And so we could run a bunch of them very quickly. So I did it on a lot of things. I did it on 4.8s and 5.3s and on all kinds of stuff. The other thing to think about when we're talking about headers, particularly with blower applications like we're talking about, like on that 5.4 or big blocks, whatever, if you have a positive displacement blower and you run a header on it, because one of the things I did on this mod motor is we did the header test NA first, and then we did it with the blower. And a lot of people immediately zoom in on the fact that, oh, okay, well, they go immediately to the flow thing. Like when you talk to somebody about cylinder heads or an intake manifold, they go to the flow thing is the thing. Oh, well, how much does that intake flow? Well, it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter if the short runner manifold flowed more than the long runner manifold. It's going to make more power anyway, even if it flowed less, because it's a shorter runner, and that's what it does. So headers are going to be the same way. So, people immediately go to the flow thing, but you're like, look, it's not just that. We see a change in power, particularly from a stock exhaust manifold or a shorty header to a long tube header, and then maybe less of a change on an NA motor where it's making 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower, whatever it is. And then do we see a much more of a change because now it's 800 or 900 horsepower? Does the flow part of it come into play more on that because we have more flow that we're talking about? Or, and this is the other thing, when where I was going with people talking about it's only flow, it's all flow. It's just, there's got to be flowage. Well, the other thing that happens when we put a blower on there, because when we had tested this thing NA, we tested it with some kind of longer runner intake manifold. I think we had a Cobra R manifold on there, and so we tested it with that, and then ran it with the blower stuff. It's a Kenny Bell blower, which has, or even a factory one running. We ran the Roots blower on there too, the factory one, but that has an ultra short runner intake manifold. It's just like an open port basically going into the head, and because it's got a blower, it's got an intercooler, it's got a common plenum, and then these openings over here that are very, very short. So because they're very, very short, the effectiveness of the header is going to change. What the reflected waves that are happening with header scavenging when they're coming in and being effective, they don't coincide now with when the runner length of the intake manifold is going to be arriving there. And so the header could become, or the intake manifold, depending on which one you're pointing at, could become less effective. So you've changed the header needs of the motor by shortening the intake runner length, even though you've added boost. So we've changed the flow. We've also changed the intake manifold. We've changed the cross homogenation there between the two. And then, do the cams favor the longer runner thing? Does this thing want to run at high RPM? All of this stuff is coming into play. There's actually a lot to think about. But one of the things, and I keep trying to get people to understand this, is that, with these big header stuff, it's not just flow. Because sometimes when we've done, I remember a couple of header tests we've done, particularly on an LS, where the bigger header made more low speed power. Now it also ended up making more peak power too on one instance and didn't on another. And then like an 1 3/4, 1 7/8 header, the 1 3/4 made more power in the middle part of it. And then that varies depending on what motor we're testing it on, what's the displacement of the motor, what's the camshaft, what is the length of the extension after that. There's a lot of things that come into play that actually have more of an effect than the change in header did. Than the change going from an 1 3/4 to an 1 7/8 header. The collector extension length had way more of a change than just the header did. That's why a lot of times when I'm running a 4.8, I just throw a set of 1 7/8 headers on there because they are easy to bolt on. And I also know that on this application, it's not really going to change very much. But so sometimes it does. Like this modular Ford, there's more of a change, but even still, based on the power output, and we were making pretty good power with this thing, I thought that there would be more of a change, especially between the 1 3/4 and the 2-inch header. I thought, oh yeah, we should see something there. Each step might not be as much, but between the two extremes, there should be some big power. But it just wasn't as much as I thought it would be. I'd like to bolt on a set of headers and have it be 50 horsepower, something like that. But I have yet to ever have that happen. And the other thing I want to mention real quick, and maybe we'll do a thing on this later on, and that's that we talk about having these big header sizes for these, 800, 900 horsepower combinations or whatever. But we don't think twice about running an 1 3/4 header on a turbo combination that's making that power. And even way more than that, because we did 1,500 horsepower with 1 3/4 primary headers and a 3-inch collector running into the two turbos that we ran on the Big Bang motors. And so what's going on there? Why are we able to get away with 1 3/4 headers at 1,500 horsepower, but we would run gigantic headers on a blower application? So yeah, just let me know what you guys think about it. Also, would you want to see a revision, like a revised Big Bang on a 4.8 or a 5.3, like maybe a Gen 4 one? And then we would use better turbos and better manifolds than I did on those initial ones. In looking at those, the 1,200 and 1,300 horsepower 4.8s and 5.3s, they'll go way beyond that. We know that, and I just, at least one of them, and it'd be kind of cooler to do it with a 4.8 because the 4.8 would be more of an underdog. But if we picked a Gen 4 4.8 and then just did it for all it was worth, it would be good. Let's see. Does a supercharged motor need a bigger header than an NA motor? Well, even of the... Ooh, this will throw it way off. Of the same power. That's going to confuse everybody. That'll be great. Because that's what we're here for, kind of. Richard, please put a link to your website on your YouTube landing page. Okay. Untrue knowledge. What's going on? Lunchbox, Midwest. When does an engine 5.8's primary need to go bigger on a turbo application? Is there a ballpark power number or some other parameter? I don't know that there is. I don't know at what point that would become a flow restriction. like the difference between an 1 5/8 and 1 3/4 header, let's say, given the fact that we've made 1,000,000 horsepower with 1 3/4 stuff, I don't know where that becomes a problem. If 1 3/4 we know goes to 1,500, and honestly, I would use those at 2,000 horsepower. So if they would go that far, an 1 5/8 headers, could they go to 1,000? Or if we get 2,000 from 1 3/4, which I know is possible, could you get 1,500 from 1 5/8? So that's what I'm talking about. Is 1 5/8? Oh, that's way too small. Is it? I've seen some 2.5. Gas should flow with higher velocity for turbo spooling. Told someone I need 2 to 2 1/4 headers on my small block Chevy. It should make 550 horsepower NA. Yeah, that's probably more than you need. Any opinions or options or opinions on hook or step long tube headers? I'm thinking get a set, but what size and for what application and all that? Oh, for a modular motor? I thought most of the stuff that we ran was not stepped. I'd have to look back and see if we ran stepped headers on those. I haven't seen magic from stepped headers in any of the testing we've done. And we've run step versus non-step headers a lot. And I haven't seen there be magic there. Maybe there is. Maybe we didn't have it on the right application. Maybe there's something. Maybe there's a little bit. We just haven't seen it. Have you ever put a 3875 crank in a factory 350 block? I have done a... I have not on a 350. I was trying to think back on, but the one that I did long ago with the Vortec on it and stuff was a 406. It was just a normal kind of thing. I don't remember doing a 3875 crank. Header size is dependent on engine size, target horsepower, and RPM. Okay. Like the chat. Yeah, everybody throw the likes up there. Throw those like signs. If you're on 180-degree crossover small block Chevy headers to a turbo versus a traditional Y pipe. Do you mean 180-degree headers? On a 468 big block, what would you recommend for what power level? We run the same headers on 496s and 540s and 565s that we do run on a 468. Normally, the engines on the dyno all get the same headers. We have different ones, and I'd like to run through more big block stuff. I just don't. We haven't seen a huge change in the power outputs. I've been curious how power changes when you undersize the header. If that same header was 1 5/8 or 1.5, would it pick up power at low RPM and kill top end, assuming flow is maxed out? I don't know that that's the case, because I think we're attributing that change to just flow. Are you assuming that we're keeping the design of the header all the same? For turbo, is there much difference with cast iron manifolds, reversed or shorty or long tube headers? The turbo is really going to dictate what happens. So if you take a look at the header, the test that I did, headers versus a log style manifold, we did see a change in response rate. And we did that on a test. We did it with an asymmetrical turbo, meaning we were just running it from one side to be able to show greater differences on the engine dyno in response rate. So it would be more exaggerated on the street, but not for flow. I mean, on a LS with the reverse truck manifolds, you can go way over 1,000 horsepower. In fact, I'm pretty sure we could go 1,500 or more. It's just that the headers would make more power, I think, a little bit more power if we were trying to max them out. What is it? Mogenation? Cross-mogenation? Big bang on a 5-liter. That would be good. And a 2-valve 4.6. I want to see a small block Chevy big bang. Memorial Day is coming up. What are the guys' plans? Holly has some big sales coming up. In fact, they asked me to do a thing on that, so I got to do a promo for those guys. I like the Holly guys. We do a lot of good stuff with them. Richard, my LS3 is getting like 17 psi hot oil pressure. Should I be worried? I got a melling on the way. I'm more worried not about that number. I'm more worried if there was a change. If you've been driving it like that for 3 years, then I wouldn't worry about it. If it's been 40 or 50 this whole time, and then now it's 17 and it changed that dramatically, then I would definitely be worried about it. Why don't we see more turbo stroker motors? I've run 383s and 408s and all that stuff too with strokers, but it's not necessary for a typical LS guy. I mean, a junkyard 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0 can go to huge astronomical power levels without having to spend money on a stroker. But you certainly can do that. I mean, we ran turbos on the 540 stroker big block, and I think turbo setups that made 1,500 horsepower engine 3/4 headers will still benefit from like a blower car and just make even more power on engine 7/8 or 2-inch ones if nothing else was changed. I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know at what point that would become something. I think the magic is in the collector size, longer collector for smaller tube headers. Collector length and design and extension definitely plays a part. When we were doing collector length extensions, we found kind of a sweet spot. And then after that, it didn't make a big change. And it made a bigger change down low and very little at higher RPM. Charger is still CFM regardless of power adder type. You could make 1,500 horsepower engine 3/4 headers if the blower was big enough. Then again, 2 would be more efficient and make way more. The interesting thing, and I need to go back and look at this because I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it happened. But I need to go back and look and see exactly what the numbers are. I think when we put the headers, the bigger headers on, I think that the boost went down, which is, and if the power went up and the boost went down, that's exactly what you would expect. L99 with blower heads cam, would shorty headers help or keep stock manifolds? Shorty headers are not going to gain a whole bunch of power over stock manifolds. If this is an L99 LS base motor and not an L99 LT1 base motor, the Gen 2 stuff. But shorty hitters won't gain a lot usually on almost any kind of stock exhaust manifold, and certainly not the LS stuff. You'll gain way more from long tube headers. They will be lighter though, and there might be a little bit like 5 maybe. My 5.3 L59 FBO is tuned with 36-pound injectors at 65% duty cycle. Will I need bigger injectors if I install the low buck truck camshaft? You're going to gain 60 horsepower if it has a stock cam in it right now. And so you have 40%. That should be enough. 36-pound injectors are enough to support if it's NA. Yeah, that's enough to support 575 horsepower or more, so you're good. What's the difference in the 5.3 heads and the 6.0? The 6.0 heads, at least all of the cathedral port versions, all the 317 heads, have bigger chambers, bigger valves, bigger ports than a 5.3 head does. They have lower compression because of the bigger combustion chamber also, because they're a 70 cc combustion chamber. 5.3 heads are 60, thereabouts. And so if you take your 6-liter heads off and put 5.3 heads on, it will make more power. 3rd gen Camaro is running engine 3/4 hooker headers on a Magnum trans. It's got a small block 400, the D1X 11-to-1, making 900 wheel horsepower. I think spending another 2,000 for 2-inch headers would make 950 to 1,000. No, I don't think you'll gain that much. And I don't think that I would spend that much on headers. I would try a much less expensive set of headers first to see if they worked on the chassis dyno or something before I would spend that kind of money. $180 like the Schoenfeld headers they run on a lot of dirt and late model cars. Just curious. No, I've never tried anything like that on a turbo. 60,000 mile, I'm assuming 327, 300 horse, sitting for years. I want to leave mostly original, but I'm sure the lifters are rotten, so I might do a modern cam and lifters with EDLB heads. Okay. Edelbrock heads, 91 octane cam suggestions. Yeah, a 268 extreme energy cam is usually the go-to for small blocks like that. You can go smaller than that, and I would actually try to run it the way that it is. Those old lifters, if it's not got water inside it, probably will still work. And if they're sticky or not working, run transmission fluid through them and clean it and then change the oil, and then they probably will work. And you could run it like that if you want. If you want to put, different heads on it, like Skip Whites or Edelbrocks or whatever you want to put on there, the AFR enforcers are good. But you could drive it around while you're saving money up for that. What size fuel line for a 525 fuel pump? Well, we've made almost 1,000 horsepower with 5/16 fuel line. So whatever you put in that's bigger than that is fine. Are you suggesting the Big Bang needs a redo? See that max you can get out of the stock cast manifolds of the T4 on each bank to silence the flow wahoos? No, I wouldn't do it like that. I would do it better than we did it. When we did the 4.8 and the 5.3, we just ran shorty headers that were flipped over. And then one of them had a 2.5-inch tube going to mount the turbo, and the other one had a 3-inch tube because that's just what we had at the time. I would just like to run those, the smaller motor or a smaller motor. I'd just do one of them with the real headers. Like I would use the hooker ones so they don't melt plug wires. And I didn't run ice water on those motors. And I'd just like to run 2 good turbos. Like we would put 2 of the GTX 3584 RS turbos on it. And especially on a 4.8, because I think that would be awesome. Because those turbos are rated at 950 each. They would have a little bit more back pressure than the S475s that we ran on the 6 liters. But on a 4.8, and having that is not going to be a problem at all. I mean, that I think that they would work good. And having the right header, having better turbos, because those turbos, the GTX 3584 RS turbos, would be way better than those 76 millimeters that we ran on the original 2 Big Bang motors. And then the air-to-water intercooler with ice water, I probably would run on E85 too, because it would make more power. But we would just run a boost controller on it so that it didn't make a whole bunch of torque. And I probably, if I did a 4.8, I would run more RPM, because that way we can help eliminate some of the torque. Is there a supercharger for 2353 Ecotech V8 with DFM, and is it worth it? Yeah, I'm sure there are blower kits for your L83 or L84, whatever it is now. That 2023 might be an L84, but yeah, there are blower kits. I just don't know how they get the necessary fuel to it. Richard, what do you think on the Chevy S10 4-cylinder engine? It's the last of the overvalve 4 cylinders. It'll be interesting to see how it handles boost. It should handle boost like every other motor does, like a reasonable amount of boost, as long as you can get fuel to it. I've never seen those motors, so I don't know anything about them. Got to do the compressed air Big Bang. It should be on a 4.62 valve. I would like to do that with those guys. I think that would be cool, because I think it'd be easier. I mean, I don't know how their setup is, but it would be easier than setting up all the stuff for the turbo stuff. Any chance there'll be a Ford V10? I would like there to be, and Bart has offered one, but I don't know that I'll get to run that. 1 3/4 header feeding a log manifold on the other side for my turbo. Just what I had to do for the room in the car. Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, if you get all of the exhaust to the turbo, then good things will definitely happen. 2015 L83 stock Can I add a turbo and reach 500 horsepower without adding bigger injectors or something? If that's what the minimum I need to change. No, you cannot do it without putting bigger injectors in there. That's the problem with the direct injected motor is you're going to, if you run boost in it, you're going to have to be able to add the necessary fuel. I don't know exactly where the L83 injectors and pump and drive for the pump off of that factory cam. I don't know how far those will take you. I'm not that familiar with that. Most people go to the LT4 stuff and then they have enough fuel flow, at least for, a good bit more power than that. 720 degree headers, 1 per degree of auto cycle. Seems like header size would be directly related to displacement RPM for NA. Header diameter, I would argue that header length has more of an effect on RPM than header diameter does. Adam LZ's new big block drift engine, 1100 horsepower, 600 plus cubic inches, 7500 RPM. That is cool. I feel my 471, 351 Cleveland flowed more exhaust from idle onward than an unboosted 351. What is the flow potential of a 471? I don't even know what they'll support. Scrolling. Eric, what's going on? How's our poll doing here? Does a supercharged motor need a bigger header than an NA motor of the same power? No. 58% saying no. If the power's the same, the header's the same. Okay, we're gonna end that poll. It's we're gonna have poll on poll action tonight, so we're gonna doing a double poll here. Should Richard redo the 4.8 Big Bang and 4.8 liter Big Bang? Let's do the original, the OG one, and make more power. More power. Twin 5356 T3 turbos or moderate size single like a 6873. It's a street truck, so drivability and fun is more important. Brandon, what is the power level that you're looking for? I'm scrolling back to see if you said something about that, but I don't remember seeing that. So first thing I need to know is if you're asking about what turbo to use, I just need to know what power it is. What is your desired power level? Supercharger needs a header with muffler bearings. What size header for a 565 or smaller? Big block up to 6500. We run 2 1/8 or 2 1/4. But I don't think a lot of those headers will fit in chassis. I think that the chassis headers that we have are like 1 7/8. We might also have a 2-inch set of headers. Have a 4V built motor, F1 Pro Charger, notchback, nice. Oh, Kingsnake, I like that. Will benefit from LT headers with 3-inch exhaust. Currently have stock headers with 2.5-inch exhausted tailpipes. Is this a 4-valve modular Ford? And you have stock exhaust manifolds on it? It would definitely benefit from headers. Where would you mount an exhaust pressure? You can actually, I tried mounting it in a bunch of different places because people were telling me, oh, the pressure's different there and there and there. It wasn't different anywhere I put it. So we have it right before the turbo, right as we have a 90-degree elbow that goes up into the turbo. We have it right there, but I also tried it like back at one of the ports. We had it mounted on a crossover on a single exhaust thing that we did. We had it in the Y pipe. We tried it at a bunch of different places, and the pressure was the same, or close enough to be called the same. Brandon. 5.3 with a low buck truck. And then how much kind of power do you want? Anyone who votes no on this poll needs to be booted. It's already 11% that are voting no. So you guys, you 11%, you guys ruined it for everybody. I want to see how much power it takes to hurt an aluminum LS since the iron ones are so robust. You can take an aluminum 5.3 as high as you can take an iron 5.3 or 6.0 or any of the iron blocks. So they're the same. But the aluminum ones, the LS1, LS2, LS3 are not the same. I'm excited for summer, Christmas this weekend at the junkyard. Oh, 40% off. Cool. 500 is more than enough with a 5.3. Well, are you talking about 500 wheel horsepower? Because a 5.3 with a low buck truck camshaft is a 400 to 425 horsepower NA motor if it has headers on it, the way that we run it. So 500 with a turbo is going to be easy. You should put one of our 3584s on it. You should put a GTX 3584 on a 5.3 if you're looking for that. Exhaust pipes don't matter unless you're running a turbocharged 4-valve. Richard should make a video seeing how much power you can get out of a 5.3 with AFM still in the engine. Are you talking about that camshaft also and those lifters? I've run that on I've run Dodge's version of that in the Hemi, and it ran fine. We've used those lifters on. In fact, we used those lifters on a cam change, and it worked fine, as long as you have enough spring rate. Someday I'll get the S10 LS swap on the road. Already have the headers. They're engine 5H with 3-inch collector, Hedman Hustlers, mid lengths. Not enough for a 6-liter. What you gonna do? No, you just run it. Just don't worry about it. Just put it in there. Have you ever gotten 100%? Yeah, we have done 100% surveys. It's very rare, but we've done it a few times. Boot the no voter, whoever answered that on the poll. What would be cool to get powder coated on the 5.4? Oh, what would be cool? The intake plenum is carbon fiber, so that's sorted. I want the valve covers to be coated. What about the cam cover? Yeah, all of that stuff would be cool. I have seen coated valve covers for those 4-valve motors, and those they look good. I saw a guy did some red ones. I've seen black ones. I've seen silver ones. What is your go-to bearings for LS builds? Also, have you ever decided to replace cam bearings on any test motor? I've never replaced cam bearings. I always have the machine shop do that. If we're going to do a full rebuild, which is the only time I put cam bearings in anything. Otherwise, I run the ones that came with the junkyard motor. And I've used lots of different kinds of bearings. Just make sure to measure them because sometimes they're different. We've used King. We've used, what is it, the C&L or something. We've used Clevite. We've used a bunch of them. Yes, that cam chips and lifters are good. GM 471 will make 495 to 693 horsepower. That's a lot. 792 cubic feet of air at 5,000 RPM. Okay. What LT headers do you recommend for 4V modular F1 Pro Charge engine, also 2.5 or 3-inch or H pipe. The H pipe or mid or X pipe or whatever, that's just going to be a function of sound quality. It's not really going to do anything. If you're making like 900 or 1,000 horsepower or whatever, I would go with a 3-inch exhaust. But I don't know what long tube headers to recommend. I don't know who makes those for the modular stuff anymore. I think the ones that we had might have been Cook's or American Racing, but none of that stuff is inexpensive. I think anymore, if I was doing it, I would find inexpensive versions. Building an NA48 LS that needs to make 350 to 400 horsepower to not break the trans. Yeah, that's very easy. That's a cammed 4.8. Cam bearings are super easy to change with a tool, hammer it out and hammer in. Yeah, like I said, very rarely do I ever do that. We run the ones that are in it. No need for the machine shop to install a cam bearing. Don't be scared. That's not the point. We don't have the tool for it. And also, like I said, I don't ever change the cam bearings because we always run the ones that are in it. And if we were in a position where we were going to change it, it's because we just had a whole bunch of machine work done on the motor. We surfaced the deck, we cleaned it, we surfaced the deck, we surfaced the heads, we may have bored it or did a ball hone on it or whatever. And so while it was there, it's very easy for them to do it because they have all the tools. Building a 4-valve for a Mustang. FY, the algorithm lords don't help the content creators if you only lurk in the background. Engage, hit the like button or say something. Okay. Camera recommendation for a 400 horsepower 4.8. Guys asking above. You should put a low buck truck camshaft in there from richardholdnerperformance.com. I have videos up where we've tested that cam on a 4.8, and it's like 50, 60 horsepower gain. If you want to go really low buck, you're going to gain a little bit less power. You can get the $159 the little Ripper cam. The idle will be a little bit better than the low buck truck camshaft. It doesn't gain as much power. It's going to be more like 50 or so. But either one of those cams are the ones that I would recommend. Do you have a wastegate size versus horsepower recommendation? That's not really how I do it. I found a good Garrett used one for an XRT, and it has an internal 42 millimeter gate with a Turbo Smart actuator. For what power level is that? We run two 45 millimeters. We ran those all the way up to 1500 with two S475 turbos. Do the low buck 4.8 cams have better lift? Better than what? The low buck truck camshafts are all the same, whether it's a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0. It's the same cam for all of those. GTX 3582R. I think you'll probably be okay with a 42 millimeter. I think we've run 40 millimeter tiles on stuff on the street. But I just like to make sure that I have enough boost control. We're going to be doing some cool testing coming up pretty soon. EGX 3582R with an internal gate. An internal 42 millimeter gate? I don't think that that's going to work. I thought it was an external, like a deal. 216, 221, 12 is a good mild cam. If that's for a 4.8, that's not what I would pick. That's bigger than I would pick. It's going to be soft down low. 2014 SS LS3 cam torque storm E85. Looking for best recommendations for mods. What is your desired power output? Chevy 3-liter Duramax diesel makes 450 foot-pounds of torque at 1500. Is there any way getting that kind of power or better out of a 5.3 at that low RPM for towing? No, because and you don't ever need that kind of power at 1500 RPM from a 5.3 gas motor. There would be no reason to do that. If you want to do a turbo diesel and you want to run that RPM, you should do that with a turbo diesel and not try to do it with a gas engine. On a refresh 6-liter with your bigger turbo and a low buck truck making 800 horsepower, do you have any concerns on longevity going in a family suburban. No, I don't. You need to make sure that the tune is right. Simplifies welding and plumbing is where I'll be putting a turbo on a low car next to a bell housing. Okay. No, I understand the desire for an internally wastegated turbo makes life easier. You just have a can that sticks up that you plug something into. But I haven't had good luck with the bigger the turbo, the less interested I am in an internal wastegate. Could you use an LY6 to replicate the 340 D-stroke build? You can, but I wouldn't do the same bore size as we did, because we use an LS3 block, which is a 4065 bore, and an LY6 is a 4-inch bore, and we normally only take those to 4030. You don't need to go to a bigger bore to make that work. It's an upgraded Barra turbo. It's rated to 700 horsepower. Yeah, no, I know what turbo it is, and I know what it will do. I'm just saying that the bigger the turbo is, the less effective and the less control an internal gate has. 3800 Big Bang, yeah, that needs to happen. See, we're up to 91%. Any plans to make PI truck cams? No, those are not on the list. EFR turbos on internal gate, but they only go to 600 horsepower. Yeah, for the smaller stuff, like when we were doing the little T3s and stuff back when we were doing the putting those turbos from the wrecking yard, from the T-Birds and from the SVO Mustangs and those kinds of things, we're putting those on Mustangs, and they had internal gates and they worked fine. But when we were trying to max those out and having the most light control, we'd go in and port the flow orifice for the wastegate. But they just work better with an external gate. See if there's a turbine housing with an integrated external housing on it. Need help with where to put the AEM wideband on exhaust with the cats still installed. If it's an NA one, just put it before the cat. Truck cams are 5.4. Yeah, I don't think that I would use the truck cams do make less power than the PI cams do, but I don't think I would pick those for a truck, because I think that the Mustang PI cams are already small enough for that. I think what he would want would be something between the PI cams and there might already be that there. It's been a long time since I ran any modular Ford cams. The last ones I ran, all they had were the comp ones. And so we ran the 262 cam, which were the smallest ones that they had. Now they have, I think, smaller cams than that. Bank 1 or 2, doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. We run it. We have O2 provisions on either side, and we sometimes will swap it from one side to the other just to verify both sides are doing the same thing. But for most of the testing, we just run it on one side. Because, you just get lazy. Unless it's worth looking into smaller twin turbo stuff to keep the internal wastegate, but then 2 turbos to buy lots of lines, intercooler piping. It is. 2 turbos is always more expensive, because you have 2 turbos. Normally you would have 2 wastegates if they're integrated. That's all part of the deal. But more tubing, and sometimes you could get away with a single intercooler, but it's going to be 2 in and 1 out normally. I like the flexibility to swap sides. Yeah, it's, again, more just for verifying things while you're running it. For a daily driven street truck, what would your ideal cam be for a turbo 6-liter, 700 wheel horsepower? Definitely want the quicker boost. Yeah, if you're going to do a G42, I would pick the smaller cam on a 6-liter. I would pick a low buck truck. There's no downside to that. There's nothing that's going to be holding you back from making power, since we have already done, even on a 5.3, we've gone way over 900 horsepower on that with that G42 turbo and a low buck truck camshaft. So on a 6-liter, you're fine. I mean, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get all the boost response, and that's what you want. Isn't the consensus that internal wastegates are not as reliable and effective as external ones and accurate? No, I mean, the OEMs use them a lot. And for packaging, they're very good. And for the intended flow rates, they're really good. But when you're trying to go and not run factory boost levels, and now you're trying to run instead of 7 or 8 or 9 pounds, you're trying to run 20 pounds. And now the wastegate is not as effective because it just doesn't have the flow rate to exhaust that amount to control that amount. Do you recommend it on overhaul kits for Chevys or other makes? No, I don't know which one you're trying to do and what parts you're actually looking for. I saw Turbo John show a worn out wastegate this morning. Had all sorts of play in it. Yeah, I like to test wastegates before I run them every time. Like I take the wastegate apart and we will lube up the shaft. I will make sure that the diaphragm moves. Make sure that there's nothing caught between the valve and the seat for the wastegate. Check the diaphragm. Just make sure that it's all that all of that's working. Because I've seen guys, and I've done this too before, just put the wastegate on and go, oh yeah, it was working last time, and then it's stuck. I mean, it's only momentarily stuck. Like if you tap it with something, it frees itself up and starts working. But if you get it working right to begin with and then put it on, it's going to work right. And then you know that you don't have, like, if something's stuck between the valve and the seat, you're like, it's bleeding exhaust out all the time, so it's slow to spool up. If it doesn't actuate at all, you have all the boosts. And so neither one of those are desirable. One of them is a little more forgiving than the other one, but you don't want either one of those to happen. I've been playing catch up, been working 2 jobs, catch up on the bills. That's good, man. Working hard. He works hard for his money. Potentially, it's easier to put twins on it. Basically, replace the cats. I would use 2 stock F6 intercoolers. Is there anything that the Lobo truck can't do? Sounds like it's going in my Element 7 swap. It and the other cams that are like that, the Truck Norris cam from Brian Tooley Racing, the Chupacabra, Summit has stuff. I mean, everybody has a cam that's going to be smaller. I obviously am recommending that because now I have a store where I can recommend a camshaft, but have for years now recommended a smaller cam so that you just get better spool up. And there's no downside to power because that's why I've done all of these videos and stories for Summit and various people, that the turbo makes the power. You just keep turning the boost up, it keeps making the power. So you can make the power. You don't need these giant size camshafts to make really big power levels. Now, if we were talking about 1500 horsepower, when we did those, we had bigger cams in it. And if I did that again, like if we do the big bang thing on a 4.8, it will probably have the Truck Plus cam, and it's not going to have the low buck truck camshaft in it, only because we're specifically not looking for low speed response. We want the thing to not have a big torque number. We just want it to have a big horsepower number. Internal wastegates are fine for small turbos and low boosts. For serious stuff, you want external. Wastegate will give you turbo lag. So you should just get rid of the wastegate entirely. G42 on a 6.7 liter small block forward. Would you recommend a 224, 236 cam? Get all the flow at 2500 and let the turbo eat? Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, what is your desired outcome here? Are you wanting to run it to 8,000 RPM? Then maybe cam it differently. Do you want a better idle and more low speed response and stuff? That camshaft with that turbo would work just fine. Part of preventative maintenance. Yeah, because a lot of my stuff, we run it hard, and then it sits for a long time. Trash Panda, I'm glad I could be inspirational. Sometimes, like today, I needed inspiration. But I just planned a trip back to go see Jimmy, so when I go back, we're going to do lots of cool stuff. We got lots of testing that we're going to do. Testing a new product for richardholderperformance.com.org.gov. I do engine builds, a lot of modular engines. Hello, what are you doing? Huh? How's my little monster? Hi, Daddy, what are you doing? Don't use my face. Don't rub my face, huh? Don't rub my face, huh? What are you doing? You're a heavy breather, huh? You are. I am. I'm a good boy. I am. I'm a good boy. I did. Did you want to come up? Do you want to come up? Go. That's it? You're still sitting down? That's as far as you jumped up? That's like a half-hearted attempt there, huh? What are you doing, Brady? What's he doing? Okay, I know you're a good boy. You're a good boy. Okay, go see mommy. Go see mommy. There you go. Package would be great, just bolting one on a collector and send it, but I want to double my power. There you go. Wouldn't it be cool if Ford made a 3 to 4 liter Cobra or Coyote 4-cylinder? Yeah, it would kind of be like a Honda. Two different personality dogs you have there. Yeah, the Brady and Bruno are decidedly different. Dramatically different. Huh, Brady? Brady always has to be the first one out the door, although Bruno is definitely the alpha male of the two. They're dramatically different. Realistic, what's your recommended red line for an NA48? It would depend on your valve train. It's all the valve train. It has nothing to do with the 4.8 motor. So where is it that you want to make power? With a low buck truck camshaft, you're not going to be making power at 8,000 RPM. I can tell you that. There. All right, Eric. We'll see you later, man. So really, should Richard redo the original 4.8 liter Big Bang and make more power? Really, 9% said no. You guys disappoint me. What's 550 and 750? Clue me in. This trip to West Tech, are you going to testing out the new ECUs? Yeah, when I go to West Tech, we will be running the Helltech. Yes, we will. Ron, what's 1300? Is that the addition of those two? 750 and 550? I get it. How many minutes we have left? I got 4 minutes or so, 4 or 5 minutes. That could be really forever in Richard time. What did you, Ron? What did you just replace? Can a 455 make 500 horsepower with factory heads NA? Yeah, I would think it could. Those heads have to flow 250, right? Does a stock 455 Buick head flow 450? I mean, it's got enough displacement. Modifying oil passages on a Windsor. I've never done that. Other than massaging the drain backs, but not the oil passages. Are new flat tappet cam failure still rampant, or has the cause been identified? I don't know. I don't run a lot of flat tappet stuff anymore. People who left. You inspired my 2.8 liter V6 M63 supercharged comp cam with a carb swap. 3rd gen Camaro. Oh, cool. Will 799 heads off of a Gen 4 4.8 bolt on? If so, work well on a Gen 3 LQ4 motor? Yes, they would work fantastic for that. You want to run an engine backwards, Thomas? Is the Caddy? I still have the Cadillac motor. Yeah. Run an LS on a Ford firing order. What can you teach us next time that we don't know? There's always stuff. I have stories coming out on changes in compression ratio, actually. So people will like that. Any difference in coil pack performances? Not that I've seen. I have to caveat that. Like now, the 1500 horsepower stuff that we did, we ran stock LS3 coils. We just have 4.5 milliseconds of dwell, and we run 18 thousandths plug gap. So there's not a problem with misfire at that combination of power level and output and coil output, and we just ran stock plug wires on it and stuff. If you have a problem with misfire and you can't adjust the dwell time of the coil, or if one or of the other of the factory coils is weaker by a lot than an LS3 coil is, I don't think that they are, and you cured that by putting some sort of aftermarket coil that had more energy at a lower dwell, like you're running on there, and you don't have the ability to adjust it, it might help. But otherwise, like I said, there's no limit to what we've done with the factory stuff. 408 Victor headed Windsor 11.5 to 1 on the street. Okay. Yeah, if you have a big enough cam in it and you run it, I don't know what fuel you're running it on, but what's your recommendation on where to buy complete overhaul kits from Chevy or Dodge? For an LS, I would get it from the guys at BTR, or we can sell it to you since we're a BTR dealer. I don't know what you're talking about rebuild kits. Are you talking about you want a crank, rods, pistons, bearings, rings? I don't know all what you want here. For turbo 6 liter, would you rather run LS3 heads and intake or a set of 243 heads and a fast intake, or optional, a set of ported 243 heads with a fast intake? Also, is boost response dramatic from either setup? Well, I would ask what you're trying to achieve. None of those would stop you. Like if you put one of our G42 turbos on there, none of them would stop you from making 1200 horsepower because the turbo will support that. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, other than making that power, what do I want? Do I want more response? I wouldn't bother with a fast intake manifold. I wouldn't bother with LS3 heads. I would just put stock 243 heads on and a truck manifold or some other kind of manifold on there. You could put a fast manifold on there, but if you haven't spent the money on it, I wouldn't spend the money on it because you don't need it for a turbo application. I didn't know an engine would run backwards. Turns out that if you're in a forward gear and move in reverse, the engine will spin backwards and continue to run, although horribly without oil pressure or water. Yeah, we've had them spin backwards on the dyno several times. But it's not what you'd want to do because all the cam timing and stuff is off. Went to go to work this morning and Vic wouldn't come out of park. 93 pump gas, 240, 249. Yeah, have a C4. Okay. Yeah, if you take all the timing out of it, you can run high compression. There's a lot of ways to bounce around that. Colder water, cold air. There's no magic to that. The factory has 11 to 1 or more motors running around on on all of that stuff. Basic stock rebuild bearings and gasket sets. There's stuff. Summit's probably going to be your best bet for getting that stuff. Yeah, with the right camshaft, you can obviously you've done away with a lot of the dynamic compression, but again, water temperature, air temperature, and then the timing curve that you have on the street. So you have a Fiero with a Camaro V6 in it, has a solid lifter cam, cross ram intake. Wow, that's cool. It was on purpose, spun on the track, freaked me out. Oh, okay. 20-year coils, 0 lifespan. I don't know. The coils that we ran on the Big Bang motors were junkyard coils. Would an increase in rocker ratio require an ECU to be retuned? If you're talking about an LS and it's a mass air car, I don't think it would. I think it would adjust to a rocker ratio change because that's not going to be a big change in power. And I don't think that would be enough to be detrimental for idle and stuff. But I'm obviously not the expert to ask on a factory ECU. We wouldn't have to change the tune on a Holly. if we just do a rocker change. Go 1 more minute. For 6 liter, I want 600 wheel horsepower, but capable of 800 wheel horsepower. So all you need, like we've already done, is a 6 liter with a low buck truck camshaft in it and springs and injectors and a G42 turbo. That's it. Doesn't matter what intake you have on there. Doesn't matter what cylinder heads you have on there. None of that matters. You just need the turbo to do that. The cam helps you because it helps get you to a higher NA deal. If you want to run that camshaft with a Trailblazer SS, that works fine. If you just run it with the truck manifold, like I said, none of that stuff will stop you from making 800 wheel horsepower. In fact, none of it will stop you from making 1,000 wheel horsepower if that's what you want to do. But it will also do 600 and 800. Understand you don't tune for before wide open throttle. We do. I do transition and stuff. What can you high level teach us in a video? I have shown you already, Ron, what happens when you run something at the optimized timing and then less than optimized timing. I'm not going to show you what happens when you run more than optimized timing because that's braking stuff. And then I have shown you what happens when you run at 10 to 1, 11 to 1, 12 to 1, 13 to 1 on NA motors. So when you tune that, what happens if it's not tuned correctly? But I can't show you how to tune it correctly unless I have your combination. Like I can't tell you exactly what the number has to be unless I had your combination. But showing you these other things shows you how far off you can be. And when you are far off, what the power level is. But the other things that happen, like with cold start or, transition between gears and things like that, that's not part of what I do. Do you prefer MAF or speed density? I always run speed density because we don't have a mass air meter on any of the engine dyno stuff other than when we ran factory ECUs. Trying to make 600 crank horsepower from an LS3 of the smallest cam possible. Would you recommend? Are you talking about doing it with boost? Still haven't quite figured out acceleration tuning, getting better, but not perfect. What kind of boost approximately to make 600 wheel horsepower on 243 heads and a stock intake on a 6 liter? It depends on what camshaft you have. In theory, compressed air in a tank would work if fired into the intake of a stock fuel-injected engine just before the MAF. How much horsepower can you potentially make safely, just out of curiosity? Did you watch the video on compressed air supercharging? What is the flow rate of your flow orifice in your compressed air? How much extra air can you flow? That's going to dictate how much extra power you can make as long as you have the fuel to go along with it. And does that air flow out backwards, which is why in compressed air supercharging, they have a valve that closes the other direction. When they inject the compressed air from the compressed air tanks, their setup will run naturally aspirated because there's no compressed air being injected. It will run naturally aspirated, but when they inject the air through the lines that come from the compressed air tanks, they close the naturally aspirated valve. So it can no longer breathe atmospheric air. It's only getting pressurized air. If you just blow air into there, you're not going to create pressure because pressure is going to go back out the other way. You could maybe add some additional air that the thing wouldn't be able to ingest of its own accord. So you could get some extra airflow. I just don't know how much it would be. A boosted 6 liter probably makes 12 pounds of boost. I don't know what the boost level is, a function of the turbo and then the NA power output. Did you use MAF on your Vortec 5 liter? Yeah, exclusively we did on that. We ran a Pro-M mass air meter only because back then we had no, I didn't have any options for tuning it with any kind of standalone thing. I only had the factory ECU. And I only had a 77 millimeter Pro-M because the guys from Pro-M gave me one. And the 36-pound injectors, I don't remember, probably Kaufman or one of those guys gave me those. So all of my stuff was just gifted to me for me hanging around and begging them for stuff. So all of that happened only because, like I said, not because I could afford it, but because these guys were being helpful. And we ran that. And the same thing with the Vortec thing. The Vortec thing was given to me. I eventually gave it back to them, but was given to me because Kip at Turbo Magazine, because I was doing stories for Kip at Turbo Magazine, he goes, well, do you want to do one on a Vortec install? I said, yeah, that would be cool. I said, I think that's really neat. And then we went there and it was like serial number 001. I'm like, oh, this is like really cool. And we did use a mass air, but I used a mass air and injector sizing to make that work and didn't do any tuning other than that, other than adjusting the distributor, playing with the fuel pressure. And then later on, I got a crane interceptor, which allowed us to manipulate sensors essentially and make adjustments. Boost requires a special math? No. But on that note, bring all your questions tomorrow.